Welcome. I'm Kevin Miller. This is a podcast for your personal evolution. In this episode, who is creative, some more than others, and how to go from creativity to delivering a performance or product. So, do we all have some creativity in us? Well, yes. Can we learn and grow to be more creative? Yes, as well. Should we all be living primarily as creatives? Well, I question this, and you'll hear that in a moment. But what creativity that we do have, whether it's art or ideas or businesses or innovations or solutions to problems, how can we best go from that idea or concept to actually doing and delivering something? I don't want to do something with every creative idea I have, but with the ones that really matter, I'd be lying if I said I just made them all happen. I don't always, and I haven't always understood why, which is why I have for you today and me as well, Zorana Ivcevic Pringle. So Zorana is a senior research scientist at Yale University's Center for Emotional Intelligence, where she studies the process of making something both original and effective, which is how she defines creativity, and explains how turning those ideas into reality always starts with the choice to act, or what she calls the creativity choice. It's a choice that must be made again and again until one's creative ideas take shape. And she has a new book called just that, The Creativity Choice, the science of making decisions to turn ideas into actions. So in this conversation, we discussed not only what it takes to get started with our creative ideas, but the psychological and emotional tools needed to sustain the creative process to completion as well. So I really appreciate Zorana coming at this as a true scientist and not telling us, hey, this is just something easy. She claims the creative process is hard, actually. And when it comes to the original idea and presenting something that's actually useful to humanity, well, I agree. That's been my experience. And I feel we do a disservice to people and ourselves when we try to encompass things into some little formula that we sell as, hey, this is easy. Anyone can do it. I find few things of value to be very easy. Simple maybe, but seldom just easy. So here we walk through the three parts of Zorana's creative process. And as you will hear, we discuss the necessary ingredients, but the ingredients that we must all assemble in a unique way for our unique selves. So you can find Zorana's book, The Creativity Choice, anywhere, of course, and connect with her at her website. And that's Zorana, Zorana, Ivcevic, Ivcevic Pringle.com. As always, you're about to hear incredible information that then you're left to do something with, take action as the topic is today, or you just go on to the next exciting piece of information and knowledge. But if you want to do something, to dig into your own creative process, that idea, that solution, whatnot, my experience for myself and others, we need personal invested guidance. We're seldom able to do it all just on our own. So if you want to connect with a guide that's fitting for you, I'd be honored to help guide you to a guide. Just email me at kmiller@kevinmiller.co. All right, coming up next, Zorana Ivcevic Pringle and the creativity choice. Let's evolve ourselves today. Zorana, this topic of creativity is one that I am very interested in. It's one I'm always curious about. And it's one that I think with a lot of topics that we often, I don't want to say get it wrong because that sounds so finite, right or wrong, but we miss the essence of it. We miss the opportunity of it. And that's what I resonated with in your message, is you helping us better take advantage of the opportunity of creativity that we may not be getting to because we define it and think of it incorrectly. How's that sit?
That is part of the reason why I wrote this book. I can see out there in the culture, in the media, in the blogosphere, in videos, that there are some messages about creativity that are misleading or that lead people to make conclusions about themselves and their abilities that end up being limiting, that say, well, if creativity is that, then I don't fit this bill.
Conclusions. Let's go there. I want to talk about some that I feel we make. Well, let's first off just talk about creativity as a conclusion that, I'm creative and so is not, or so is creative and I'm not, as opposed to, I look at pretty much everything as a spectrum for one. And I'm going to ask you about that, us being on the spectrum. And I also feel like, and I was thinking about this as I was reading the book, that there are probably, instead of just labeling myself as creative or not overall, that's one issue. The other one, though, is certain areas of my life. Are there certain areas where, gosh, in that area, you would see me and go, gosh, Kevin, I think is really creative. Over here, he's not so much. How's that? How do
You
you?
are touching on so many really important questions.
Okay.
Perhaps we start with a spectrum, and I very much agree. Creativity is a spectrum. We use the single word creativity, or hey, somebody is creative, or more or less so, for convenience and because we like labels as humans.
Yes.
Um, but scientists really distinguish four major levels of creativity. And that gets to your idea of a continuum. On the very basic level is what we call mini C creativity. And that is creativity that happens in the learning process. When you are learning something new and then you have an insight, you make a connection to something in your personal experience, and all of that helps you learn better and more effectively. On the next level, we have little c creativity. Right now, we are going from many to little. And that kind of creativity is shared usually with others. It's not just personal to your learning process or doing something. It's shared, but not necessarily broadly, not necessarily with the whole world. So it could be friends and family, something you do in everyday life. Uh, and then on the next level, yet, we get to professional creativity. And that is based on and depends on expertise. It depends on what we know, how we build new knowledge, how we use that knowledge to some original and effective ways. And finally, on the very highest level, which is brings us to that other topic that you mentioned, some misconceptions people tend to have, is big C creativity. That big C creativity is first people that come to mind when you say the word creativity, those eminent creators, those Einsteins of this world and Pablo Picassos of this world.
Mm-hmm.
Those people who are so giant that we don't even know where to start, right? And because sometimes our culture is stressing them as models of creativity, we end up getting a message that, well, I am not an Einstein, therefore I'm not creative.
Okay, so on that, let's jump to something you talked about. It was a survey, some research that you guys did, or that you were a part of, I think, and looking at how we depict creativity. No
Mhm.
surprise, the number one area is around, paintbrush and the visual arts and whatnot, which is what I like with art. If it's art, that's what it is, art and creativity. And yet that's an area I've been interested in because I don't participate in those at all. I don't paint anything. I don't sculpt anything. I don't make music per se. I don't XYZ. And yet I have always thought of myself and been referred to as somebody who's very creative, especially around entrepreneurial things or, just ideas and solutions and issues with problems. But it still doesn't seem to get the billing of that. If you are creative and artistic, it is related to those things. So is that one of the conclusive areas where we then label it amongst that? And if we are not participating, then we're by proxy not very creative and we miss out.
I think this is probably the biggest misconception about creativity out there. That creativity has to do with arts, and that if you're not artistic, therefore you're not creative. I do not paint or sculpt either, and I don't make music, but I do other things. I am a scientist, I am a writer, I'm a communicator, you are an entrepreneur. All of these things are creative in their own right. And it's helpful to remind ourselves, what does the word creativity mean in the first place? We don't tend to start with the definition because, well, of course we know what creativity is, right? Um, and we do on some level intuitively know, but when we start defining it formally, we open up those possibilities. So scientists define creativity as something that is in the same time uh, original and effective or useful for its particular purpose. And that originality can be of different kinds. Like we discussed levels of creativity. So originality can be something that is original just for you, but is creating insights that are helpful and that are something that you never considered before. Or it can be original so that it's solving an everyday problem, or it can be original in a way that is creating new products, creating new services, making people's lives better or easier. And it's important that it's both original and effective in some ways. So it's not just free for all, it's just original, just crazy. It has to be effective. And sometimes, especially in the workplace, people, when they hear the word creativity, are a little bit skeptical because, well, those crazy ideas are just going to be crazy. But in order to be truly creative, they have to be solving a problem or being useful or doing something that is better than existed before.
Okay, and looking at that aspect. Okay, here's another question that I found myself thinking about in reading your book. And again, not wanting to be rigid or finite or whatnot, but that at some point we seem to want to espouse that everybody can be creative. Everybody has creativity in them. Okay, let's say that that's the case, and I would say I tend to believe that. Well, I'll question you. Do you tend to believe that we can all be creative? We all have some level in us. Yes.
I think we have the potential to be creative. That does not mean that we all are creative.
Okay, well, take that then, because my question was, if we have a team in the workplace or whatnot, whatever. I have found that I tend to be pretty innovative. I tend to be creative, and I'll come up with an idea and maybe a bit of a framework for that idea to exist. I don't know if I'm much use past that. And so I have stopped trying to quote, wear all the hats. And I do that part. And then I find people who are really skilled at taking it to the next step, and even administration and maintenance and finishing. I've done different tests, and finishing something is always last for me. But I start stuff that other people never would. And so I've learned to value that, but get help. And so I've got a couple of questions there. One is, so is it relevant to say, okay, some of us creativity may be your main shtick. Other ones, not that you're not going to use it, but it may not be your main area. Thank God, because if all we had with these crazy creative people, we would never maintain it. We would never administrate it. We would never finish anything. How am I tracking?
Uh, I mostly agree with you, but
Okay,
I have a few things that I would like to add to it.
please, or
Um,
critique it. I'm here to learn.
Yeah. So one thing that you're pointing out to is the magic of teams. It's the power of teams. And there could be different roles on teams, and people have different strengths and they have different weaknesses. And you are describing a particular strength of yours. Your strength is ideation. It's coming up with ideas, creating those frameworks and ways to help others envision it, and then the building of it, elaborating, or the minutia of it can be done by other people. But I think what is important for creativity is also the finishing part. Now, this is not to say that everybody has to do all the steps in the process. I think you have found something that is fantastic and works great because you are basing your creative work on teams. You find people who are going to be good at different parts of the process. Um, but if you were only doing ideation, and if you were only coming up with um, new ways of thinking, uh, but not sharing them and not bringing together people who are excited about other parts of the process, um, I don't think that would be sufficient. I don't think that would be sufficient to even call you creative.
Hmm.
It would be essentially limited to imagination. You have ideas, maybe you discuss them with somebody over coffee, and they stay at that, either something in your head or something in a close relationship. Once you take those ideas and in any which way make them happen, I think that's what true creativity is. And you don't have to do all of it yourself, but that process of transformation uh, goes from potential to something that is real, useful, tangible, and influencing the world.
We're here obviously with the muse of your new book. It was writing my book.
Mhm.
Well, no, writing it wasn't difficult. Finishing it was difficult. I really struggled. I ended up, even though I was with a big name publisher, and of course you get all the people involved in that and the editors and whatnot, I ended up hiring, I paid 10 grand out of the advance. I took it and spent it on my own editor to help me formulate and help me structure and whatnot, because I just was really struggling. I had the concept. Obviously, I sold the concept. Everybody appreciated that. But my gosh, bringing it to fruition, very difficult. So I was involved with it, but I had I was on a leash, or I shouldn't say that. But I was guided, very specifically by someone going, okay, this doesn't work. You need to put this here and take this out and whatever. And it gave me a lot of appreciation for this, the point of creativity, but bringing it to fruition.
And it's what you are sharing there. I love that story because it shows the importance of other people in the creative process. Like writing a book is a great example because you are writing a book. I wrote a book and I was the only person writing their book. There was no ghostwriter involved,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But working with a developmental editor is very helpful because it takes you outside of your head, provides you feedback, tells you how that sounds to a naive reader, somebody who does not live in your head,
Yeah.
how it comes across, clarifies it. That does not in any way diminish your creativity. That means you're using the tools and being aware of the social nature of creativity. So even that you ultimately have to be the one to put the words down, but feedback helps. And discussions with others help because it, especially in that process of evaluating, of elaborating on ideas, finding just the right stories and right words for some ideas to come across, that is both very, very difficult and something that we benefit from relationships.
Okay, let's go with that, because even as I would say, okay, I'll take credit for the creativity of the topic of my book and the concept. I don't know that I'm very creative with words. Even I love reading fiction, and I read it with awe of, oh my, I can't imagine, just like music. I love music. Can't imagine coming up with a melody and the things that they do. So, even within an area that I would say, gosh, I have some creativity in that specific area, but not in all aspects of it.
Mhm.
No different than I was just, I'm in a new place, and design does not, I just don't seem to speak that language, visual design. So one of my daughters was in here rearranging everything. Thank goodness, to make it look good. So again, that concept I appreciated going, am I creative or not? Well, sure, I have some aspects of creativity. It may even be a primary area of my life, propensity of mine, but it doesn't cross everything. Is that another conclusion that we make, that, oh, I'm creative, and then we think we are everywhere? And then I know in my life, it's so obvious to me that there are some areas in my life where I just don't seem to be creative at all. or not
There
much?
are few people who are creative in many areas of life, but there are only few people. We call them polymaths. We historically call them Renaissance people. They do exist.
Yeah.
Um, However, for most of us, for most of the rest of us, you are making the right observation that we are creative in a particular aspect of our lives. And uh, Even what we care about in that aspect of our life that we are creative in can be even more specific. So let's think of entrepreneurship as an area of where somebody is creative. Somebody certainly could be creative. There is wonderful research on entrepreneurial passion, showing that there are some people who specialize, in a way, we can say specialize, who are passionate about um, ideation, coming up things that you have described, that you're describing with yourself, coming up with ideas, brimming with new energy of something that hasn't been thought of before. There are others who are really passionate about starting organizations. They are those who are really passionate about building them up. So even if we are talking about a particular domain of work, kind of work, discipline like entrepreneurship, they could be even more specialized areas where people are creative, where their creativity comes as a particular strength.
Okay. In I've been talking about, in a sense, who is creative. Now, one of the aspects of your book that I appreciate for the focus of it is you clearly state that there's a lot of resources out there on research about how to be creative and how to foster that. And you appreciate those, and that's not what your focus is. Your focus is not how to be creative. I think this is right out of the book, but how to bring creativity to market. Uh, yes.
It's it's very similar. With I would put a little bit of a different
Okay.
emphasis in a sense of I am not going to. My goal is not to teach you um, how to be creative in the sense of a cookbook or a process or a methodology. I want to draw your attention to what creativity is, what you need to know about it, and how it works, in order for you to learn the strategies that can take you from that initial decision of, yes, I want to engage with ideas that I have, to something that is tangible that you have after the process is complete. I'm not going to take you step by step. I am not going to promise you that only if you follow these, 10 things, you are surely going to get there. But I will draw your attention to things we do not normally talk about.
Okay. And I really appreciated that, Zorana, because you're saying something that's not real popular these days, and yet I think it's needed. And I'm reading a book by a guy who's no longer alive, and he talks about this. And then here you are, and I read it, and you really said a similar thing that I feel like we need to hear, all of us, me too, kind of countering the specific methodology, 5 steps to this, the 7 keys to this, the whatever, and saying that that's what's going to work for us, that your creative process and bringing it to market is going to, you figured it out. Here's the formula. If I'll just take it and follow it, it's going to happen for me. Instead saying, no, mine's going to be different. But these are how I kind of paraphrased it was you're showing us, here are the ingredients that you're going to need to include in yours. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, exactly. That was my exact intention. Here are the ingredients, how you are going to put them together, and in what proportions they're exactly going to be. That is going to depend on exactly what you're working on. And I don't think that those methodologies live up to their promise. And I didn't want to set up the reader to have expectations that end up disappointing them. So I want to say, hey, here are the things about creativity that chances are you have not heard about. We do not tend to talk about creativity being difficult. We do not tend to talk about creativity taking a long time and a lot of effort and being an emotional roller coaster of things that you just have to deal with. We do not talk about, hey, what happens when you hit a wall? And we do hit walls in creative work. It happens. It's so common that we can say that it is to be expected part of the process. And I wanted to talk about that. I didn't want to say, here, step one, here's the workbook, here's the cookbook, because I don't think it's essentially honest or ethical.
Well, again, thank you. And I'm going to expound on that. I had somebody literally yesterday who was kind of being a little critical of the methodologies, and they talked about reading, something about the morning routine, and somebody who had great success, and they espoused the methodology of you get up in the morning, you do your creative work first thing, you shun everything else. And he said somebody else who he completely respects said literally the opposite, that they go through and do all the minutia first, get it out of the way, and then they're creative. And then I know for myself, my brother, my blood brother, his most creative time comes late at night, about when I'm in bed. And that's when his, and I'm going, what's the secret sauce? I don't know, man, whatever works for you. Either way, though, what they all did is they all intentionally sequestered a time that fit their personal energy to be creative. The intentionality, that was the path in essence, but they all defied certain methodologies. And that's what I hear you saying.
I love your examples because they so deeply resonate with me. The idea of intentionality, it is crucial. Creativity is work. You have to set aside time, and time that you're going to commit to. When that time is going to be and how that time is going to be organized, it depends on knowing yourself. Of course, when I started writing a book, and how it is when you are writing, and you do pay attention to, and you watch some videos on strategies for writing, for successful writing.
Yeah.
And I remember coming across this piece of advice of get up at 5 a.m. and write for 3 hours. You know what would happen, Kevin, if I got up at 5 a.m. and tried to write? Completely incoherent word soup, because I am not functional at 5 a.m. And we need to know things about ourselves. We need to know who we are. We need to know what are our preferred areas and times of activity and energy, and use that. That is an ability that we learn, something we learn from experience and experimentation, and something that is related to the emotional side of the creative process.
Well, so I want to be nosy and ask you. So when do you usually have your intentional creative time?
I
How
am
do
much
you,
closer to your brother.
yeah?
So if I could, I cannot always choose exactly how I would like to organize my work, because the world is really organized for morning people, not for night people.
Yeah.
So I have a child, I have to get him ready for school, and their work starts in the morning. Um, but if I could really choose, I would be writing from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Interesting. Interesting. Thanks. I appreciate that. Yeah. I have my own little shtick as well of different times. It even seems to differ between the focus. Spiritually, I do that first thing in the morning, and I don't do it. I may do it at 5. I may do it at 4. I may do it at 8. Whenever I wake up, thank goodness. And that's kind of a spiritual time. But then I do kind of want to get through the minutia of life and emails and whatever, do that, get that out of the way. And then I have my vocational creative time. But I love hearing the differences, but the ingredient that, like you're talking about, of having intentional time. So another big point that you make, and you said it a minute ago, and it was the essence of people not talking enough about the challenge of creativity. So reading your book reminded me of my dad. So I grew up with a very innovative father, a lifetime entrepreneur, and he used to talk about being creativity and ideas, as you talk about in the book. And his quote was a little paraphrasing for me. He said, "Ideas are a dime a dozen. It's the person that implements them that succeeds." So I grew up with that, and especially in relation to people who have ideas who are trying to be real secretive with it. Like, I don't want anybody to know. They may steal it, they may take it, whatever. And he's like, "Come on, there's your idea." Not to minimize it, but to some degree, it's not worth anything unless you do something with it. You're probably not going to do something with it unless you get help. You're going to have to share it, which comes into that's part 3 of your 3 steps that we're going to hit in a second. And you mentioned a minute ago the social aspect of it. Yeah.
Yes, I very much agree with your dad. Just think how many times in life it happens that you come across something and realize that you had that same idea, but you never did anything with it. It happened to all of us, probably. I'm a scientist, and it happens that I read scientific papers and think, oh, I had that idea 10 years ago, but I
Yeah.
am doing so many other things. It didn't happen. And of course, just because of laws of physics, we cannot do all of our ideas. We cannot implement all of our ideas and develop them because we tend to, when we care about creativity, tend to have more ideas than it's possible to really build up. But creative work is based on, okay, you have something and then you do create something from it. And just like your dad said, you were going to need to have help. And that help can be explicit. Like you were sharing earlier, that you have particular strengths in the creative process and you bring together a team with people who have different strengths. That is very common in the process of scientific research too. And that is very common in the entrepreneurial process. It is very common in all kinds of organizations. And then these are the tools, social tools and material tools, that help you make it real.
Well, and I want to get into your 3 parts here. I did want to bring up a statement that you make in the book, a focal point, where you said a central trait from your studies, from your research, a central trait of those who are creative, or might say, are flexing that creative muscle, is openness to experience. And then you said a few things, but curiosity is what jumped out at me. But even that openness to experience, and I wonder your thoughts on. I tend to feel that culturally right now, I'm almost feeling like there's less creativity because people tend to be less open to experience. We talk about it a lot in kind of a polarized right, wrong, black, white culture that is not coming together well, not collaborating well. And I wonder from that, there is less openness to experience. I hear so much subjective thought it's tried to be shared objectively, and I don't feel openness. So I was kind of asking your pulse, because I'm tempted to say, is the culture in some ways being a little less creative based on that trait of openness to experience being a little less maybe right now?
I think that is a very interesting idea. Uh, I'm a scientist primarily, so I will have to give you a scientific answer.
Tell me. Yeah.
At this time, we do not have evidence
Hmm.
that you are right, although I would have the same hypothesis.
Hmm.
And as an opinion, I agree with you. And I think there is a very good basis for your opinion, and very good basis for considering it not just an opinion, but a valid starting point for research. But we don't have that information yet to say really data shows that that there is support for it. Openness to experience, how I describe it in the book, is considered by psychologists a personality trait. What that means is set of descriptors that we usually have adjective words to describe them, that that tell us something about how people typically think, feel, or act in their everyday lives. So people who are more open to experiences tend to be curious about different topics. So they tend to have broad interests. Even if they are not good at something necessarily, they are interested in art and interested in what's new in research and what's new in technology. And they are curious about and attracted to complex topics. And coming back to what you mentioned, not just black and white, by trying to see different perspectives. And considering this definition, I think that the culture of polarization of either this or that can be narrowing people's focus. Um, we need data to really show changes through time. At this time, we do not have data. I'm not aware of that data. And it is possible that the consequence is diminished creativity on the more societal level.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that feedback on it. And I can also just take ownership of it as I read from your research that concept of central trait of those who are creative is open to experience. I motivate myself to be more open to experiences, to be more open to other people's perspectives, to consider, to not be polarized, right, wrong, black, white. That's a path I have been on for a while. And to hear that that aligns with creativity, I'm inspired. So thank you.
And it's oftentimes psychologists are talking about this trait and other very central traits to describing who we are as individuals, and studying the biological basis of them and finding that to a large extent there is something that seems to be inherited with them. But in that discussion, we sometimes don't hear the other side, and the other side is that there are also things that you can do. Just like you were sharing your purposeful attempt to see different perspectives, we can purposefully try to broaden our experiences. So, yes, for some people it comes more naturally. So, my husband and my son, when we go to a restaurant, their criterion, and my son was like this since he was 2 years old. His only criterion in ordering in a restaurant is that he never had the dish before.
Wow.
what Whatever it is, he was never a picky toddler. He was never anything that you think of about a toddler or a young child. He kind of came with it. For me, it didn't come naturally. So I had to very purposefully say, hey, I want to try something new because that is a value I have. It might not be the first impulse, but I can take a pause and say, this is what I want, and this is what I'm going to purposefully do.
Well, yeah, I like the decisive aspect. Again, we're back to intentionality as an aspect. You then give focus here in the book, in your message, on three parts of creativity. And well, the first one includes something I haven't asked you to define, and you talk about the creative choice. So explain that for us first.
Um, some time ago, well, a long time ago, I am going to date myself now. I'm not, because I'm not going to tell you the year, but a few decades ago,
Uh-huh.
um, when I was still a graduate student, I came across a research paper by a very well known creativity scholar, Bob Sternberg. And the title was Creativity as a Decision. And my first visceral reaction to it, I had lots of reactions to it, but my first visceral one was, hey, what are you saying? Are you saying that if people are not creative, they just did not make a decision to be so? Is it essentially their fault? And that didn't sit right with me. But you know how sometimes you hear something and you cannot stop thinking about it? It
Mhm.
was one of those nagging things.
Hmm.
And I kept thinking, what does this mean? How could it be? Can I get it? I took it as a challenge. I wanted to learn and truly understand what this could be. And so I wanted to know and examine in my own research what goes on in people's heads as they might have ideas, but now what happens next?
Hmm.
And I have discovered that there are three kinds of things that go on in people's minds that made me come to agree with this concept of a decision for creativity or choice, what I call it in the book. um, it collectively had that flavor. So the first consideration people have is outward oriented. It's a consideration of, okay, if I share this idea with the world, with my immediate environment, or more broadly, what are people going to say? Am I going to anger somebody? Am I going to disappoint somebody? Am I going to be stepping on toes? Are people going to think I'm challenging their authority? The second consideration is, well, what's going to happen with me if I do something with this idea? It's inward oriented. Am I going to be self conscious if I try to utter it and let it go outside of my head? Is it going to make me uncomfortable or anxious? And then a third consideration is completely different flavor. It is creativity is really important to who I am as a person. This is something that I want and need to do. And as we have these thoughts, we do something with them. Thoughts are not just something that stays in your head, because these are combination of thoughts and feelings, and they end up influencing what you do. And if you have these anxiety and tension colored considerations, uh, then you might be making one set of decisions. And if you have primarily those of this is important to me, you might be making different set of decisions, whether you do something with your ideas. And so that really made me think, Bob Sternberg was right. This is about a decision.
Those three things, thanks for sharing those: outward oriented, inward oriented, and then who am I as a person? What will people think about me, of me? What will I think about me in a sense? To me, is it fair? I would tend to put those all under my identity, how I identify with myself, one, and then in a sense, how secure I am in my personal identity. Thoughts on that?
I think that you are on the right track, especially this sense of my identity is coming. An important part from creativity can be part of your self concept, how you think of yourself. And then these sort of emotional evaluations towards others or towards yourself are coloring your decision making process. Now, it is not that one important thing, it is not that if you have some concerns about how others are going to react to your ideas, that's not reasonable or that's going to prevent you from doing anything. It is just saying that they come into consideration when you're making the decision. I recently came across this quote from Georgia O'Keeffe, the great artist, and she said that she was never comfortable, that she was essentially terrified of everything she ever did in her life, but that did not prevent her from doing it. And I personally very much identified with that. It is, I do have some of those considerations. Hey, what are other people going to say? Hey, I have some doubts about myself, perhaps. Um, but I also can recognize them for what they are, and that this is important to me is stronger. Plus, I have some abilities to deal with those feelings that can complicate the creative decision making.
I I think then of being aware, not just being aware. I want to be aware of the feeling, not eradicate the feeling. I think to the no fear concept, which years ago I realized I don't agree with that. No fear, I'd be a psychopath. That,
Exactly.
if I ever show up for one of these podcasts without a little bit of nervousness, without a little bit of, maybe call it imposter syndrome is what I used to call it, but I think it keeps me on my toes and keeps me invested, and I appreciate that. It doesn't control me though. I'm aware of it, and I hope that I can harness it well. I appreciate fear. I'm glad that I have a bit of fear of heights because I don't really want to fall to my death from a hike or whatnot. Okay, well, thank you for that. That was my preface to then going through the three areas here, because the first one is how to make the first creative choice and get started. And you had some subsets of that. What shapes my initial creative choice? Can I be creative? Kind of the identity. Do I think of myself as creative? And have I, this is one thing that jumped out to me there, is have I been exposed to creativity even? Could you have someone who innately has a lot of creativity in them? It's a part of who they are, maybe even to a high degree. But if they've never been exposed to it, if they grew up with parents or an upbringing that was very limited, which I've met people who have, they just weren't exposed to it. It would be like an athlete that maybe was one of the most natural born athletes ever, who grew up in a, not to pick on academia, but an academic house where they were never exposed to it, and they were homeschooled, and they just didn't have TV. They didn't watch sports. And it never came out. So unpack that more. Number one, how to make the first creative choice and get started.
You have touched something very important, and that is that sense of confidence of, can I do this? And we know that we tend to do those things that we believe we can do. I recently gave a talk to a group of designers. They were museum designers, exhibition designers, and experience designers doing really wonderful work. And at the end of the presentation, the end of the talk, I got a question from the audience that was along the lines of that no fear idea. You have to be comfortable with, or you cannot be anxious about. And the question was, how do I eliminate doubt?
Wow.
And my answer was, you cannot.
Yeah. Thank you.
And it's okay. It is totally okay that you're experiencing doubt. The presence of doubt does not mean that you do not have the ability. It is not diagnostic of you not being creative. And it doesn't mean that at those times when you tend to think that you are creative, um, and tend to share that there is an imposter syndrome going on somewhere there. No, we all have times of doubt. some more so than others. And the important thing to remember about confidence is we might wish for it. It's not pleasant to feel doubt. Um, it's not pleasant to fear insecure at times. So we might wish to feel 100% confident, but that rarely exists for most of us. That does not exist as a possibility. And we also need to remember that it is not an either or proposition. If you don't have 100% confidence, that does not mean you have no confidence. Confidence is, I like to use an analogy. I oftentimes think in terms of metaphors, and I find them very helpful. So think of confidence as fuel. We all drive cars, and they need fuel. Does your tank have to be 100% full? Does your charge have to be at 100% for you to drive your car? It does not. You can get from here to your destination with sometimes half a tank. So if we take again that idea of a spectrum and a continuum of confidence, having a little confidence, maybe I can do this, is enough. It's enough to get you started. It's enough to get you partway there. Once you are partway there, you can look back and say, I was able to do that. Chances are I will be able to do the next thing that has to be done. And we build confidence from experience and from observing our behavior, observing our successes, and from paying attention to what other people are telling us about their confidence in our abilities and their evaluation of our successes.
I so like all that. And you also reminds me that in the book, you also talk about the creative process, the need for courage, not, I think you said in there, even not bravado, not brashness, whatnot, but courage. It reminds me, I too have read that quote by Georgia O'Keeffe. She says, I think she did use the word terrified. I was terrified all the time.
Yeah.
And I did it anyways. And I can find that I can I can have fear, I can have insecurity, even sometimes in my confidence, even knowing, like for instance here, I haven't done a show yet. Hope this is not the one where my guest said that was just horrible. It was the worst conversation I've ever had, or had one. And so the public had that as well. I have a lot of proof that I've done well, but it still takes some courage. So I can have confidence and courage, but it's not, as you said, I feel we often, well, back to your statement, come to conclusions and hurt ourselves by thinking that the point is to eradicate the fear completely. And I think it's inhuman.
It's inhuman, and we have these expectations about feelings, what we want to feel, what we should feel, and that are not reasonable. We have this idea of, we want to be happy. Of course, we do want to be happy, but that does not mean that you can be happy at all times. That's not humanly possible. It is not how humans work. And if your goal is to be happy 100% of the time, you are going to fail 100% of the time. And the thing that we do not acknowledge is that all emotions contain important clues. And these clues can be used to tell us, right now, this kind of feeling is beneficial for a particular kind of thinking. So I am going to do something with that knowledge. To give you an idea, to give you an example, this is very abstract when you first mention it, and you go like, what does that mean? But we mentioned earlier at what times and how you organize your creative work.
Right.
And those times of preferred activity are related to emotions too. So at those times that you are naturally, because of your biological rhythm, more energized, you tend to feel a little bit more enthusiastic, a little bit more positive. And those kinds of moods color thinking. They color thinking so that they broaden it up. And at those times that you are most active and most energized, you will be best at coming up with new ideas. But that's not to say that this is the only thing you need for creativity. Coming up with ideas is important, but it's not the only thing. So what about other times? What about those times, like we mentioned, who is a morning person, who is not? I am not a morning person.
Mm-hmm.
So when I get up in the morning, I tend to be subdued, somewhere between subdued and grumpy.
Fair.
And I mean, I joke about myself because I did not manage in life to change that. That is just, I wake up in that state. Goes away with time, but I wake up like that. And that also colors thinking. And that makes you really good at critical thinking. So now imagine doing something creative, right? You have used an example of you writing a book, and I have recently written a book. So that example is prominent in my mind, but it applies to other work too. So in those times that I am feeling more critical and better able of being critical, I will be better at reviewing and editing that which I have written the night before at those ideal writing times for me, which is somewhere between 4 and probably 10 or 11 at night. Uh, but in the morning, I can see everything that is wrong with it.
Mm.
Last night, I thought it was great. But now that I am in this grumpy mood, I see what can be done differently. And you need to make it better because no writing is good from the first try. That does not exist. So most writing is editing, and you can use that. You can say, right now, this is what I'm feeling. Okay, I have an infinite to-do list. Which of these tasks on my infinite to-do list is best done in the mood that I currently have?
Well, that leads us to number two, but I am chuckling a little bit because I am so here we are, two relatively creative people. And yeah, in the morning is when everything looks bright and shiny and great to me. And by about 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm just kind of done. I'm ready for dinner and some entertainment or something because otherwise I'm going to get grumpy. So again, here to our paths, not our methods. And you mentioned a lot of, okay, your part number two about the psychological and emotional needs, tools that we need to navigate the creative process and stick with the creativity choice. And you say in there, one of your leadoff statements was that our world is solution focused, tends to be solution focused. Creative individuals are often problem focused. So there's a couple of different aspects that I want to hit on in this one. But going back into what psychological and emotional tools do I need? Different than, as we talked about, different than what you need, different than what George O'Keeffe needs. What do we need to navigate our creative process and stick with our unique creative choice? Did I say that well?
Yes, you said it great. I actually think the tools are the same for you and for me and for Georgia O'Keeffe. We are going to apply them differently.
Fair, like the ingredients. Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
So we are going to apply them differently. So what the tool is the knowledge that emotions, our moods, are related to our thinking. And then we get more specific and say positive, energized moods broaden our thinking. Therefore, you can go in different directions and different perspectives and go a little bit crazy. That's the time to come up with ideas. The other part of that knowledge is, well, those times that you are a little bit downcast, your thinking is narrowing. And what you are going to be good at is focus, drill in into those ideas that you have in broad strokes and add detail. Add detail to them, evaluate them, revise them, and then bring them to life that way. And for creative work, we need all of that because we need to come up with the concept, we need to develop it, we need to change it, and in that process, all of our emotional complexity is going to come into play. So the tool is knowing that there is a connection between feeling and thinking, knowing in which ways, and then pausing in your everyday life and saying, hey, how can I use this to my advantage? Now you are going to this is going to look differently for you and for me, because you are going to say, hey, first thing in the morning, I can come up with ideas because this is when I'm fresh, this is when I'm energized. At 3 p.m., I starting to feel that irritation coming on board. Okay, maybe you can revise something and look at things more critically at that time, but perhaps after 4 or after 5, you are only good for doing busy work.
Mm-hmm.
um, for me, it's going to be completely different, but the tool stays the same.
Okay, I had not thought about this previously, and you talking right now, it came to mind because another point you said is the creative process is an emotional roller coaster, and you're mentioning emotions in the second part here again, that from a health and wellness standpoint, is a big focus of my life, just general, health and wellness and nutrition and exercise and sleep and yada yada. That we know, scientifically from a sleep perspective, when we are tired, some of the first things to go, and there's a list, but the ones that always stuck out to me are some of the first things to erode are creativity and critical thinking. Well, as I look at my work as primarily creative, that's what motivates me to keep myself in line. It's what
Yeah.
motivates me to get sleep, to not eat or drink the things that are going to harm my sleep. Because when I wake up in the morning with the after effects, I can't do my work. I got a whole day of just busy work because I can't tap into it. And I experience that. So looking at my, call it self-care or whatever, of my emotions, knowing that that's directly related to and I like, again, those 2 points, creativity and critical thinking. I mean, we've all got a need for that in our day to day. I don't know anybody who doesn't, even if they don't look at themselves as having highly creative jobs. Critical thinking, who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
So tell me about that. I hadn't thought about it prior to this.
Yeah, and I actually think it's a little bit unfortunate that we use the term creative thinking, to be honest with you,
Okay.
because it makes it seem that that's the creative part and the part that is critical thinking is not creative part. Well, they both work together to make something that is creative. So I wish that we had a different term to describe this broad open ideational process, so that we don't get this just that is creativity and that there's a separate thing that is something else.
Can I ask you about that,
Yeah.
Zorana? Because I almost relate that to decision making, which we've talked about here. It's a big part of this. And we do have that kind of an old cliche, old adage of we think we make decisions analytically. And yet studies show that we make them more emotionally. But it's again separating those two. So are you kind of taking aim at that and saying it's both, and we're hurting ourselves with that conclusion that it's one or the other?
Yes, we are definitely hurting ourselves with the conclusion that we are either rationally thinking or emotionally thinking.
Okay.
The best thinking and the best decision making is a kind of thinking. So the best that we can do is use more information. So it comes very intuitively when I say, hey, you need information to do decision making, right? You need to know what you are making decisions based on. But we don't think of emotions as containing information. Emotions really are expression of one way of processing information. They're telling us something about the state of our mind, information about the state of our mind. Emotions are giving us information about the state of the world around us. So when we are feeling, to use an example, when we are feeling happy, it means the information we can get from that feeling is that everything is good in the world, in our world. Not to say everything is good in the whole world,
Yeah.
but everything is good in your mind. You are not seeing or foreseeing problems. Your progress on goals is doing well. You are satisfied with the state of what you are striving for. That is information you get from being happy. What is the information you get from frustration? Well, you get the information that the approach you are taking is not working. And by extension, you need a new approach. But oftentimes, we do not pause and say, hey, what is this? What is this feeling of frustration telling me? And instead of saying, hey, what is it telling me and how should that influence my decision making? We just continue doing the same thing over and over again. But if only we paused and said, what is this information? We could use it for better decision making. So the best decision making is the kind that uses all information available. Some of that information comes from emotions.
Okay, I help myself with that information. Thank you. Your third point we touched on earlier, and I said we'd come to it, and it's in regards to our social world, our creativity, and our social connections. I really went to social influence, even to thinking about, with being creative, with trying things, with testing things, with being innovative, all those things. I grew up in an environment where that was not only welcomed, it was really inspired. And I feel like I got an aspect of faith just handed to me on a silver platter to try things. What a gift. That was my exposure that lent itself to creativity and realizing, kind of like what we talked about before, somebody could have no exposure to being creative in some ways, or could have a social construct that didn't give much support for them as well and soured them against something that was just bad luck on their exposure. So the pressure of, well, I shouldn't say that, the benefit or the negative of our social world, is that what you're ultimately saying, can have such an impact on our ability to be creative or not, or our propensity to?
Creativity is social even when it doesn't seem to be. It is, and in ways that you are describing very, very vividly there. Sometimes our mind goes, when we hear the word social and creativity, the first place we go is collaboration and teamwork. And those are great examples, but those are not the only examples. The other ones can be implied sometimes. So you mentioned your social and cultural world, social and cultural exposure. Well, I grew up in communist Eastern Europe. I did not have any exposure to entrepreneurship, none. And my parents are wonderfully creative, but they always were creative and they developed new products, developed new work processes, but always in the context of large organizations that provided them the infrastructure to do that kind of work. And it never occurred to me to have expression of my creativity in entrepreneurial ways until much later, many decades later in life. Uh, and it's not to say that it cannot change, and it's not to say that your social environment growing up is destiny. There are exceptions, and we certainly change through experience and through education and through purposefully making choices and getting into different environments. But the influence is there, making it easy or making it more challenging. And another important part of the social nature of creativity is what kinds of relationships can help us in different parts of the creative process, from that ideation that you are, self-identify as a star at, and those times of developing and critically thinking about and elaborating on ideas. And if we know what kinds of relationships are good at what times, we can then purposefully, that theme of being purposeful and intentional coming again, we can purposefully try to structure our work around them.
It got me thinking again about, as I often do, the blue zones. Dan Buettner is famous for his blue zones and just the power. That's the value I got. The main message I got from his work is just the power of our social groups, for better and worse. We hear that a lot, but I don't see us culturally harnessing it enough. And I'm grateful for the exposure to that information, because I found myself realizing how much of my ultimate success, if you want to call it, is going to be derived from surrounding myself with people who support those directions, who understand those paths, even, which is probably, yeah. Well, I know you speak to it in the book that, gosh, if you want to be creative, get with creative people, put yourself in intentional creative things. But in this socially, again, I have also, Zorana, I've also suffered for myself by remaining isolated, taking my little idea down to the basement and just working on it and not getting exposure. And I grew to almost always regret it. And now today I find myself in the most, again, I don't always want to use the word collaborative, but just getting input and feedback more than ever. So as I've gotten older, I feel more needy, more desiring of input to help, well, everything, and especially my creativity.
I would say more aware of
Okay.
how the process functions and then acknowledging it and knowing to purposefully maximize it,
Yeah.
because you have through
Yeah.
experience discovered it.
Yeah.
You could discover it by explicitly reading a book, of course, but we also oftentimes discover things through our own experience. You have worked on your idea isolated in your basement and seen that it doesn't get as far as reaching out to people and enriching it or taking it in different directions or leaning on different people's expertise for different parts of it. And you have taken that knowledge very seriously so that it changed your behavior. It changed your behavior so that you know what you are great at, you know how to add to that, and then you know what things you are less of a strength and how to create teams that can work together.
Yes. And I'm still learning.
Of course.
Thanks to people like you. Again, Zoran, I really appreciate the focus, not just on creativity, but on taking the creativity to action, how to turn our ideas into action. I feel like it's so needed. I'm excited to share this with friends and family, and also with my audience here. So thank you for bringing the book to fruition, so that it gave itself the opportunity for me to talk with you here. It's been a gift. It's been a gift to me, been a gift to my creativity. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Kevin.
Friends, thanks for joining us in that discussion. Again, that's Zorana Ivcevic Pringle, and her book is The Creativity Choice. And you can find that anywhere. The book, of course, it's just come out, and you can connect with her at her website, which is her name, Zorana-Ivcevic-Pringle.com. As always, you just got great info. If you want someone invested in you to help guide you to actually bringing it to fruition and integrating it into your life, I would be honored to help guide you to a guide for you. Just connect with me by email, kmiller@kevinmiller.co. Till next time, here is to the evolving you.
Yeah.